Hello and welcome back to my very long-awaited video. My name is Alex says F1 Stuff, and I've actually just realised it's not long-awaited for anyone watching, it's been long-awaited for me. I've been planning this video for a very, very long time. I say very, it's been about 2 months, or coming up to 3 months in the making for whenever this actually releases, and my god, I am finally happy to be recording this damn thing. Anyway, I have uploaded a video just before this, the first episode of this series that I will create about Formula 1.5 as a whole, which explains exactly how I'm doing it, the assumptions that I've made, and all sorts. I'll link that in the corner and in the description down below as well. So if you already watched that and you know exactly what's going on, awesome. If you haven't, go and watch it and then you'll fully understand what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. So I'm going to just start right away and move straight on in to Australia. So Australia's qualifying was a bit of a dodgy one, as it was a rain affected one, so the Q1 times were faster than that of the final Q3 session. Anyway, with that said, let's move on into Q1. So the drivers out are Maldonado, who failed to set a time as he was outside of the 107% rule. His teammate Romain Grosjean, not a great day for Lotus at all. Esteban Gutierrez and Marcus Ericsson were only separated by 0.04 of a second for 13th and 14th on the grid, with the Marussia pairing of Jules Bianchi and Max Chilton next. Moving further into Q2 now, we see Sergio Perez qualify 10th, with Kobayashi squeezing in front of him in the Caterham 2/10 behind the Sauber of Adrian Sutil, with Jenson Button a clear 1.1 seconds in front but missing out on his first Q3 slot of the year. So the final qualifying shootout of the first race of the hybrid era in this Formula 1.5 championship. Who will grab the first pole of the year? It won't be Valtteri Bottas or his teammate Felipe Massa, as they are separated by 0.06 of a second for 5th and 6th. A long 7/10 behind the Toro Rosso of Daniel Kvyat. Nico Hülkenberg secures 3rd, with Jean-Eric Vergne getting on the front row of the grid, 1/10 behind the McLaren of Kevin Magnussen, the first pole of his career in his debut season for the McLaren outfit. Taking a look at the starting grid for the Australian Grand Prix, Valtteri Bottas and Gutierrez both received 5-place grid penalties in the race, with Romain Grosjean breaking Parc Fermé rules, and he will start from the pit lane. And obviously Pastor Maldonado outside of the 107% rule, but will start the race under the steward's discretion. This will be a common theme for those that don't know. Let's move to race day now. Who will secure the first victory of the season? Unfortunately, it won't be Kobayashi or Massa, who both retired on lap 1 of the race. Ericsson in the sister Caterham also failed to finish 2, with both the Lotus drivers retiring on lap 29 and 43. Jules Bianchi was able to finish, but 8 laps down on the lead runners. Max Chilton scores a point on his debut for the team, with the Sauber pair in 9th and 8th, both a lap down. Sergio Perez fights back from a poor qualifying in 10th to finish 7th. The Toro Rossos failed to capitalise on their outstanding qualifying, finishing 5th and 6th. Hülkenberg misses out on his first podium by only 3 seconds behind Bottas. Jenson Button had an amazing race from 10th to 2nd, but it was his teammate Kevin Magnussen who converted his first pole to his first win, 3 seconds clear from his World Championship teammate. So as we take a look at the fastest lap, Bottas takes all bragging rights here, but as there were no points available at this time, nothing will change in the championship. He just gets the glory of being the fastest man on track. So let's have a small look at the championships now. Magnussen leads the way with his maiden win in Melbourne, Button and Bottas following close behind, with the Saubers, Marussias and Lotuses coming in pairs all the way down to Kobayashi, who is yet to score. So the Constructors' Championship sees McLaren take a very convincing 25-point lead ahead of Toro Rosso and the Force Indias, who are both on 18 points. Williams follows 3 points behind on 15, with Sauber and Marussia both scoring 2. Lotus and Caterham are yet to get off the starting mark after round 1. As we fly from Melbourne all the way to Malaysia for round 2 of the Formula 1.5 season for 2014. So qualifying again was a wet session, with the Q1 times being faster than some of the final Q3 times. With that said, let's move on into Q1. So Ericsson qualifies last, 0.02 away from Max Chilton in 15th. Then come the two sister Caterham and Marussian cars of Kobayashi and Jules Bianchi in 13th, 8 tenths faster than Kobayashi. So Sutil and Maldonado round out the final drivers, separated by 5 hundredths in 12th and 11th respectively. Let's move into Q2. Now this is the closest session of the season so far, with 6 drivers separated by 5 tenths, with Grosjean coming in 10th, 1 tenth off of 9th place man Bottas in the Williams. Perez had an off day in Force India in 8th, behind the sister Williams in 7th. Gutierrez and Kvyat complete the Q2 session in 6th and 5th. Who's going to grab the second pole of the season? Let's move into Q3 and find out. So Button is 4th, 2.3 seconds off of the pole man. Verne had another amazing qualifying for Toro Rosso in 3rd, with Magnussen getting another front row start, but it's Nico Hülkenberg who secures his first pole for Force India and his second pole of his Formula 1 career. So there wasn't much change with the starting grid here. Perez failed to start the race due to a gearbox issue, and Bottas moves back 3 places with a penalty. As we move on into the race for Malaysia. So we saw a total of 5 retirements, excluding the non-starting Sergio Perez. Maldonado was out on lap 7, with Jules Bianchi on lap 8. Verne failed to convert his 3rd place grid start to a points finish, retiring on lap 18. Both Saubers are next on 32 and 35. Chilton is the first finisher, picking up a solitary point in 10th, 2 laps down from the leader. The 2 Caterhams are next in 8th and 9th, both lapped as well. Grosjean moves up 2 places to finish 7th, and Kvyat went backwards from his grid start, picking up 8 points in 6th. Race winner from Australia Magnussen is next in 5th, a lap down from the leader. The Williams pair are next, having a close battle all race, finishing 4 tenths apart, with Massa picking up the podium spot in 3rd. Button secures his second place of the season, but it's Nico Hülkenberg who comes away with his first win and his first podium, a distant 36 seconds clear from the rest of the field. So taking a look now at the fastest laps, it is Massa who secures it here. Williams untouched in the fastest lap so far, but again, no points, so there are no prizes. So taking a look at the championships now, these are the gains. Hülkenberg scores 25 points and Massa finally gets off the mark with 15. So let's see what this has done. Hülkenberg moves up to 1st, with Massa leaping up the order from 15th to 6th. And the 2 Caterhams also take a jump forward as well. Taking a look at the differences now, the top 3 are separated by just 3 points, with Bottas a close 8 points back. Kvyat and Massa are at the top of the midfield, 11 points back, and 5 points clear of their nearest rivals. The lower half of the board is all very close, with Ericsson, Chilton and Gutierrez all sharing 2 points. Moving to the Constructors' Championship now, McLaren were the big gainers, with 28 points, followed by 27 for Williams, with their double points finish, and 25 for Force India. There weren't any big movers in the Constructors, but a lot of shifting around as Force India move up to 2nd, with Williams now 3rd, Toro Rosso 4th, and Sauber 5th, sharing points with Lotus and Caterham in 6th and 7th. So McLaren still lead the way, 28 points clear from Force India now, who have Williams close behind them by 1 point. Toro Rosso have found a middle ground, 20 points clear from Sauber, but 16 away from Williams. So moving from Malaysia, now we take a look at Bahrain, round 3 for the F1.5 season for 2014. So qualifying was finally the first dry session of the season, and Q1 sees the usual suspects of Max Chilton and Marcus Ericsson, Jules Bianchi and Kobayashi out in 16th, 15th, 14th and 13th respectively. Sutil is next in 12th, 1.5 tenths back from 11th place man Pastor Maldonado. So Q2 sees the sister Lotus of Grosjean in 10th, only 0.017 seconds back from the Sauber of Esteban Gutierrez. 6 tenths in front come the 2 Toro Rossos, keeping up their good qualifying run in 7th and 8th. Hülkenberg, though, fails to get into Q3 with a 1 minute 35.116. As we move to the third Q3 session of the year, Q3 is definitely a sweet spot for Kevin Magnussen, the 3rd time he's now in 5th this time. Massa and Button are on the 2nd row, 4th and 3rd, with Sergio Perez just under a 10th off of poleman Bottas for Williams, taking his first pole of his career. And that's 3 races and 3 different drivers and 3 different teams on pole position. So not much change in the starting grid apart from Adrian Sutil taking a 5-place grid penalty and starts 16th at the back of the grid. So there are a total of 6 DNFs in the field, with Sutil and Verne taking their second in a row, retiring on laps 17 and 18. And it's yet another double DNF for Sauber as Gutierrez got flipped upside down by Pastor Maldonado on lap 39. The biggest shock of the race, though, a double DNF for McLaren, with Button stopping just 2 laps to go. Bianchi scores his first points of the year, a lap down from the leader. Both Lotuses get into the points in 6th and 8th, with Chilton getting his best finish between them in 7th. Kvyat sneaks forward 2 places from the start to finish 5th. The top 4 was split by 8 seconds, with poleman Bottas in 4th, 6/10 back from Massa, who again gets the podium ahead of him. It's a fantastic 1-2 finish though for Force India, from 2nd and 6th on the grid, with Perez taking his first victory of the season and his first of his career, 4 seconds clear from Nico Hülkenberg. Fastest lap though, Williams are finally toppled here as Hülkenberg bags a 1 minute 38.785. Taking a look at the championships now, Perez makes the most gains after his victory in Bahrain, and there is a lot of shuffling about as Perez jumps to 8th from 5th ahead of Massa now. So Hülkenberg extends his lead over Bottas to 16 points, who gets in front of the 2 McLarens after their double DNF. Perez moves to within 4 points of them, with Massa just a point behind him. Again, the lower half of the field is in a close battle, with Grosjean just in front of Verne, with the remaining 7 drivers separated by 7 points. So Force India were the big gainers, taking home the full 43 points available, with Williams scoring 27 and Lotus scoring 12. Taking a look at what that's done to the championship now, Marussia gain a solid 7, boosting them up in the table above Caterham and Sauber. So Force India are now 15 points clear of McLaren, who are only 2 points ahead of Williams now. Toro Rosso are in a nice middle ground, 33 points off of Williams, but 18 points clear from Lotus. Marussia, Caterham and Sauber are in a close battle for not being last, separated by 3 points overall. As we move from the deserts of Bahrain to the streets of China. Although they're not actually streets, it's just a normal race circuit. So it was another wet qualifying, with Q1 opening with Pastor Maldonado failing to set a time. Then comes the Marussia-Caterham train, with Chilton and Ericsson at the back and Bianchi and Kobayashi out in front. Gutierrez also fails to get into Q2 with a time of 1 minute 58.988. Taking a look at Q2 now, last round's winner Sergio Perez qualifies in 10th, 1.3 seconds off of getting into Q3. Magnussen's Q3 run ends this round as he sits in 9th. Sutil and Kvyat are 1/10 apart, with Button 3/10 clear in 6th. So let's take a look at the 4th Q3 session of the year. Grosjean finally makes it into Q3 in 5th. Verne keeps up Toro Rosso's consistent qualifying in 4th, with Hülkenberg 4/10 clear. But it's the first front row lockout of the year for Williams, with Bottas P2 and Massa on pole, just over a 10th clear. So taking a look at the starting grid now, Maldonado failed to set a time within the 107% rule, but he will start the race under the steward's discretion, and he also received a 5-place grid penalty. I did say that Maldonado and penalties and the 107% rule is a recurring theme. As we move to the race day in China. There were only 2 DNFs this time round, the 3rd in a row though for Adrian Sutil. Grosjean also stopped on lap 28 after a good qualifying the day before. None of the Caterhams or Marussias made it into the points as they take their usual alternating positions, 11th, 12th, 13th and 14th. Gutierrez scores a point in 10th. Massa had a shocking race though from pole, finishing in P9, a lap down from the leader. Maldonado, who made big ground from 16th to 8th. Magnussen moves up a few places to finish 7th, with Verne and Kvyat continuing their good run of race form with 4th and 6th. Jenson Button slots in between them in 5th. Sergio Perez fights back from 10th all the way to the podium in 3rd, 28 seconds off of race winner Nico Hülkenberg, who takes his 2nd win of the season and the 3rd for Force India in 4 races, with Bottas finishing where he started in 2nd, 1.4 seconds clear. So Perez grabs the fastest lap this time round. It is now 2 apiece for Williams and Force India in the fastest lap race. So Hülkenberg scores the maximum 25 points in China, with Bottas scoring 18. The McLarens grab a double points finish after their awful double DNF form in Bahrain. So no real movement in the top of the grid, but the two Toro Rossos make gains up the midfield, with Kvyat reaching towards the top drivers. So Hülkenberg extends his lead further ahead of Bottas to 23 points, almost a race victory now. Bottas, though, is 11 points clear of both Perez and Button, who share 46 points each. Magnussen and Kvyat are separated by 3 points in 5th and 6th, with Massa slipping to 7th. There isn't much change in the lower half at all, as 7 drivers are still separated by 7 points. Force India make the biggest gains with 40 points, with McLaren and Williams taking 16 and 20 points respectively. Toro Rosso also make a 20-point gain, Lotus 4 and Sauber just the 1 point. So the only change in the Constructors this time round comes with the swap of Williams and McLaren for second in the Constructors. Force India extend their lead to 37 points over Williams, who are only 2 points clear from McLaren now. Toro Rosso further cement their 4th place, 31 points back and 34 points clear from Lotus. Sauber move closer to Caterham, but are still 8th in the championship. And from Japan we move to the sunny circuit of Spain in Catalonia. It is the 5th race of the 2014 Formula 1.5 season, and as always we start with qualifying. So let's move on into Q1. Maldonado is out again for the 5th time in a row with a second DNF in qualifying. Then come the usual suspects, the 2 Caterhams, then the 2 Marussia cars, with Chilton being 1.3 seconds off, getting into Q2. Sutil is next, 11th, 3 tenths off of Verne, who is in 10th, the worst qualifying performance for Toro Rosso this year. Moving into Q2, Magnussen in the McLaren crashed out, failing to set a time. Gutierrez is in 8th for Sauber, with Kvyat in front by 0.03 of a second. The 2 Force Indias lock out the 3rd row of the grid, both being knocked out in Q2 for the first time this season. So Q3, the final shootout of the session, Massa lines up 4th, 7 tenths back from Button, just ahead of him in the McLaren. Grosjean gets his first front row start of the season, but he was 3 tenths back from poleman Bottas in the Williams, who takes his 2nd pole of the season, and it's the 3rd pole in a row for a Williams. So the starting grid, Verne's race weekend didn't go very well at all, qualifying 10th and also getting a 10-place grid penalty starting at the back row of the grid. So let's go straight on into the race ahead of the 66-lap Spanish Grand Prix. Verne has not had a good weekend at all, retiring on lap 24 to add to his poor Saturday in qualifying. The 2 Caterhams and 2 Marussias are next outside of the points and 2 laps down. Sutil and Gutierrez finish 11th and 10th, with the latter picking up a solitary point. Maldonado comes back from last to finish 9th, albeit a lap down though. Massa went backwards in the race from 4th to 7th, not having a good start to the 2014 campaign. The 2 McLarens are next in 6th and 5th, 1 lap down from the leader. The Force Indias had a strong race to finish 4th and 3rd, with Perez picking up the podium from the 3rd row. Grosjean finished where he started, securing Lotus's first podium of the season, but it's Valtteri Bottas who secures his first win, an entire lap ahead of the rest of the field, dominating the entire weekend. Although he did not secure the fastest lap, that right goes to Kvyat. As for the championships after Spain, Bottas claims the full 25 points, with Romain Grosjean more than doubling his current points tally. There aren't too many movements in the field, with the top 7 drivers staying in place. Grosjean and Maldonado move up a space each, and the bottom drivers stay put as well. So after that, Bottas closes the gap at the top, with Perez pulling away in 3rd. From Button to Grosjean, each driver in between is closely separated by 4 to 7 points each. Verne in 9th is ahead of the bottom half of the grid, 14 points back from Grosjean, but 8 points clear from Maldonado, a nice little middle ground there. The bottom half is also very close, with 6 drivers separated by 7 points. Taking a look at the constructors now, Williams were the big gainers from this weekend, with Lotus 2 picking up a good haul of points thanks to Grosjean. There were no movements at all in the Constructors' Championship after round 5, with Williams moving closer to Force India, 33 points back now, and 15 clear from McLaren. Lotus moved a bit closer to Toro Rosso in 4th, moving to within 18 and pulling away from the bottom 3 by 33 points. As we leave the race circuit of Catalonia and we move to the jewel of the... what do we call it? The jewel of the Formula 1 season? The jewel in the crown? The fanciest race of the season? It's Monaco. Everyone knows it's the race you want to win. So we begin with qualifying no different as to any other session. So we move straight into Q1. It's the same drivers out, unfortunately. The 2 Caterhams, 2 Marussias, and also the 2 Saubers. 2 by 2 they come on the back 3 rows of the grid. The big shock though is Felipe Massa not making it into Q1 in 10th place. So Q2 was an exceptionally close session with 6 drivers separated by 5 tenths. The 2 Lotus drivers are next after Grosjean's front row start in Spain. He now starts 8th in Monaco. Race winner Bottas starts 7th with Button, and championship leader Nico Hülkenberg also out in Q2. As we move to the final qualifying session to determine who will start from pole from the all-important Monaco GP. So Perez is in 4th, 7/10 back from the pole man. Danny Kvyat was half a second back from his teammate who starts the Monaco GP from pole position. So Verne has taken pole only 0.015 seconds clear from Magnussen in the McLaren, who scores another front row start. Unfortunately, looking at the starting grid, Bianchi gets a 5-place penalty and moves to the back of the grid, with Ericsson starting from the pit lane. And hopefully Toro Rosso can convert an outstanding 1st and 3rd in qualifying into a solid race result around the streets of Monaco. It's the race that every driver wants to win, the one that they must win if they are to win any race of the season. Maybe apart from your home race, but it's the one that most people want to win. We start with Maldonado failing to start the race due to a fuel pump failure on the grid. Perez had a first lap incident, retiring on lap 1. Then, annoyingly, the 2 Toro Rossos, after having the best qualifying in their history, both retire from the race on lap 10 and 50, failing to score what should have been a huge amount of points for the team. Bottas also failed to finish in P11, just outside of the points. Chilton and Kobayashi were both 3 laps down, but safely in the points in 9th and 8th respectively. Magnussen finishes in P6, going backwards from his starting position. The best result of the race was Jules Bianchi finishing in P5 for Marussia, his best ever finish in the sport, scoring 10 points for him and the team. Grosjean had a good race from 8th to 4th. Massa scored a podium, turning around his poor Saturday performance. And Button also gets his 3rd second place of the season, a full lap down from race winner Nico Hülkenberg. It is important to note here though that in the real race, every single driver, including Hülkenberg, was lapped by the leader, so I couldn't find the actual race time, so I added his fastest lap of the race to the total race time set by the real winner of Nico Rosberg. It wasn't all doom and gloom for Williams though, as they did secure the fastest lap of the race. But with another victory to Nico Hülkenberg's name, he scores all the 25 points available to him. Button and Massa and Grosjean also score big, with Bianchi making big gains with his 10 points. All that means quite a bit of shuffling around, as Bianchi jumps from 16th to 10th, with Button and Massa also moving up the field. Hülkenberg still leads with a big gap now, 35 points to Bottas, who has Button really close behind now, 8 points behind. Perez, Magnussen and Massa are all still in a close fight for 4th, separated by 8 points overall. Verne is still in the lead in the midfield battle, but it's now Bianchi that's behind him by 7 points. Maldonado, Chilton and Kobayashi share 10 points, with Ericsson, Gutierrez and Sutil on 8, 5 and 4 respectively at the tail end of the grid. As for the Constructors' Championship, McLaren make the biggest gains, just with 26 points over Force India's 25. Williams only score 15, with Lotus and Marussia scoring 12. Again, there is no change in the leaderboard, but Force India now have a 43-point lead over Williams, which is now a comfortable 1-2 finish. McLaren moved to within 4 points of second place and are now 71 points clear of Toro Rosso in 4th. Marussia is now 6th, 33 points back from Lotus, but 3 points clear from Caterham and 12 clear from 8th placed Sauber. As we move from the jewel in the crown of Monaco to the streets of Montreal. Whether you classify it as a full street circuit or not, it is still a very narrow circuit. As always, we start with qualifying and we jump straight into Q1. Gutierrez failed to set a time and qualifies 16th, then come, as usual, the 2 Caterhams and the 2 Marussia cars, with Maldonado yet again failing to make it out of Q1 for 6 out of the 7 races this season. Q2 starts with the other Sauber of Adrian Sutil in 10th. Danny Kvyat is in 8th, 4/10ths off of a Q3 spot. Perez and Grosjean occupy the 4th row of the grid, with Magnussen only 1/100th of a second behind the championship leader Nico Hülkenberg in 5th place. In Q3 for the Canadian GP, Button is the last of 4 Q3 runners, with Verne continuing Toro Rosso's good qualifying form. But it's Valtteri Bottas who takes pole position in front of his teammate by only 2/100ths of a second. One of the closest Q3 sessions for pole position this year, and it's Williams' 3rd front row lockout as well. Also a first, this is the first time that there are no grid penalties, so everyone will start where they qualified on Saturday. Let's jump straight into the race and see who comes out on top. Off the bat, both Marussias retire on the first lap, followed by Ericsson's Caterham on lap 7. Maldonado and Kobayashi also fail to make it to the halfway point of the race, let alone the end. Kvyat, Grosjean and Gutierrez are next to retire from the race as well. Sutil is the first finisher, 1 lap down, and still behind 2 more non-finishers of Massa and Perez. 10 out of the 16 drivers retired from this weekend's race, the most out of the entire season so far. Verne almost makes the podium, 4.4 seconds behind Bottas. Hülkenberg secures P2 from 5th on the grid, and Button takes his first win of the year for McLaren. Massa secures another fastest lap for Williams at the Canadian GP. Button is the biggest gainer with 25 points, with Hülkenberg getting 18 more for his championship bid, and Verne finally gets some decent points on the board with 12. Not many movements in the Drivers' Championship at all. Button moves up to 2nd ahead of Bottas, and then at the bottom, Sutil gets in front of his teammate. So Hülkenberg extends his lead an extra point to 36 ahead of Button now, who is 2 points clear from Bottas. Perez falls further behind in P4 by 28 points, with Magnussen and Massa within 10 points. Grosjean, Kvyat and Verne form a top midfield group, being 19 points clear of Bianchi, who leads the bottom half by 1 point from Maldonado, Chilton and Kobayashi, who all share 10. McLaren with a big gainers, scoring 35 out of 43 points available to them this weekend, with Force India and Williams scoring 26 and 21 respectively. Toro Rosso make up for their Monaco weekend, scoring 12 points, and Lotus get a solitary point. The only movement in the championship order is for 2nd place, with McLaren getting back in front of Williams. Force India's lead has come down from 43 points to 38 ahead of McLaren now, who are 10 points clear of Williams. Toro Rosso fall further back from the front 3, 84 points behind, but they pull further away from Lotus by 17 points. Sauber move closer to not being last on the leaderboards after scoring 6 points. They move to within 3 of Caterham. Round 8 in Austria, we return for the first time for a little while. It is home to the Red Bull Ring, who aren't actually here in this video. However, their sister team Toro Rosso, hopefully they can score good points on their behalf. As usual, qualifying starts us off and we jump straight into Q1. Unfortunately, it's again the usual 4 at the back in their alternating fashion this time, with Ericsson and Chilton on the back row and Kobayashi and Bianchi in the row in front of them. The 2 Saubers also fail to make out of Q1 in 11th and 12th. As we move to Q2, Grosjean is the slowest of the Q2 runners, 0.88 seconds off of a Q3 spot. Verne and Maldonado are next, separated by a 10th, and last time winner Jenson Button in Canada is out in Q2 in 7th place, 2/100ths off of Perez in 6th. As we move to Q3, the final qualifying session of Austria, Hülkenberg crashes out, but he still made it through, so he qualifies 5th. He's behind Kvyat and Magnussen on the 2nd row, 7/10ths back from the pole man Felipe Massa and teammate Bottas, who secure Williams' 4th front row lockout and their 2nd in a row. There are a few penalties to give out though, as Perez and Chilton get a 5 and 3 place drop respectively. As we look towards the race at the 71 lap Ostering, unfortunately it's a double DNF for Toro Rosso, the only 2 DNFs of the race. Gutierrez is the first of 5 drivers to finish a lap down, behind the alternating quartet of Ericsson, Chilton, Kobayashi and Bianchi, who scores a single point. Grosjean gained 1 place from his start to end in 9th, behind Sutil and his teammate, who were both a lap down. Button could only manage P6 in the race after his win last time out, and Nico Hülkenberg finishes 12 seconds clear of the 2009 champion in 5th. Magnussen is next in 4th, 3.2 seconds behind third place man Perez, but it is Williams who score their first 1-2 finish of the season, with Bottas ahead of poleman Massa taking his second win of the season. As the fastest lap goes to Perez, who was 4 tenths clear of the race winner Bottas. But it is the Williams driver who makes the big gains in his bid to become world champion for the first time, with a 25-point boost to his score. Maldonado and Sutil nearly double their current scores as well down the field, and Massa and Perez also make big gains. As for the Drivers' Championship, Bottas retakes second from Button. There are still no big movements in the middle of the field, but Bianchi slips behind Maldonado, who now moves up to 10th. So Hülkenberg's lead at the top has come down from 36 points to 23 now, no longer with that race win victory he had over Bottas, who's now 15 points clear from Button. Perez still sits 23 points off in 4th, 5 points clear of Magnussen and 7 from Massa. Grosjean still heads the midfield on 47 points, 30 from Massa. Maldonado now starts to break away from the bottom half, moving closer to Verne. Williams take home the maximum 43 points, with Force India and McLaren taking home 25 and 20. Lotus gain 8, and Toro Rosso and Sauber both gain 4. So Williams retakes second in the Constructors' Championship after losing it in Canada. Toro Rosso, Lotus and Marussia stay put, but Sauber move clear from the bottom half of the grid ahead of Caterham. And again, Force India's lead is slowly coming down from 43 to 38, and now it's 30 points ahead of Williams, who are 13 clear from third place McLaren. Toro Rosso are now a huge 114 points back from the third place team, but only 9 points clear of Lotus now. Both these teams are in their own little group, as they're 41 points clear from Marussia in 6th, who have Sauber and Caterham very close behind. As we move from the Osterring to the race circuit of Silverstone in Great Britain. As always, we move straight into qualifying and Q1, which opens with the two Caterhams on the back row of the grid, 7 seconds off the pace. They've had no luck at all with their good car design this year. The huge shock, though, is both Williams cars are out in Q1, 3 seconds off of Adrian Sutil's Sauber in P12. Maldonado gets into Q2 only for the second time this year. Gutierrez puts his Sauber in front in 10th. The two Marussias had a cracking qualifying in P9 and P8, with Bianchi getting the better of Chilton this weekend. Grosjean rounds off Q2 in 7th, 2 tenths clear of Bianchi. As we get to the Q3 session, the two Toro Rossos are on the third row of the grid, behind Sergio Perez in 4th. The top three were covered by 2 tenths of a second, with Magnussen's McLaren in P3, Nico Hülkenberg putting his Force India on the front row in 2nd, but Jenson Button secures pole position at his home race. It's looking good for the Brit this weekend. Hopefully he can break his taboo. There are again a couple penalties this weekend. Chilton and Gutierrez receive a 5 and 10 place penalty respectively. Maldonado was excluded for a fuel issue, and both the Caterhams were outside the 107% rule, but were allowed to start under the steward's discretion. Race day at Silverstone. Hopefully Jenson Button can finally get his first podium at a British Grand Prix. As the race opens with a first lap crash for Massa, and neither Gutierrez's Sauber or Ericsson's Caterham made it to the halfway point in the race. The only other retirement was Maldonado on lap 49, 3 laps from the finish. Bianchi scores another point for Marussia in 10th, 1 lap down from the leader, with Sutil in front in 9th. Grosjean slips back a place from his starts to end up 8th for Lotus. Perez also falls back a few spots in P7, also a lap down. The two Toro Rossos finished together in the same positions they started, 5th and 6th. Magnussen makes it onto the podium to finish P3, albeit 58 seconds behind the race leader. Button in the System McLaren scores his first podium at the British Grand Prix, but after Saturday that wasn't the result he'd have wanted at all. Valtteri Bottas, though, storms to victory from P10 on the grid to finish 17 seconds clear of the McLaren in what was the longest race of the season so far at 2 hours and 27 minutes. To add to his victory, Bottas also secured the fastest lap, only just though by 0.02 of a second from Jenson Button. Bottas brings home another victory for Williams, bagging 25 points for the team. Button secures 18 from his second place finish. So there are no real movements in the top or bottom this time round, but the midfield all shuffles about, with Magnussen moving up to 4th, Kvyat getting back in front of Grosjean, and Sutil moving ahead of Bianchi for P11 in the standings. So Hulkenberg's lead has come down further after Bottas's victory to 10 points now, with 2 races left till the summer break. Button falls back to P3 at 25 points behind, with Magnussen now P4, 28 points off his teammate. Perez is still a close behind in 5th, with Massa in 6th. He needs to be a bit more consistent during the fight with the top 5 drivers. Kvyat now heads the midfield group from Grosjean and Verne, with Maldonado spearheading the lower half of the grid on 16 points in P10. Only 9 points separate him and last place man Gutierrez. So McLaren make the most of Williams' single finisher and gain 33 points, with Williams only gaining 25. Force India, although getting a double points finish, only manage 18 points, the same as Toro Rosso. Marussia and Sauber also gain points in the lower half of the grid. Again, there are no movements on the grid in the Constructors' Championship today. Force India's lead is coming down still, now 23 points ahead of Williams, and McLaren take a step closer to them, to within 5 points now. Toro Rosso fall further back to 129 points, but 23 clear from Lotus. Marussia still leads the bottom 3 teams on 23 points, with Sauber close on 21 and Caterham at the bottom on 18. As we leave the airfields of Silverstone and move to Germany. So there are now 2 races to go until the summer break, but Germany in the Nürburgring is still to go before the last race before the first half of the season is done. So there are 2 Germans on the grid this year, Adrian Sutil and the current championship leader Nico Hülkenberg. Let's see how they get on at their home Grand Prix. As always, we start off with qualifying. So Marcus Ericsson failed to even start the Q1 session as his Caterham qualifies in 16th. Then come Chilton and Kobayashi 14th and 15th. Maldonado splits up the alternating fashion we've seen for the last few weekends and lines up 13th. Jules Bianchi qualifies 12th, half a second back from the first German, Adrian Sutil, in P11. Q2 only has 4 runners, with Romain Grosjean being the first of those 4 in 10th. Gutierrez joins him on the 5th row of the grid. Verne and Button are next in Q2, separated by only 900ths of a second for 8th and 9th. Q3 begins with both the Force Indias on the 3rd row, with Hülkenberg getting the better of his teammate this time round. Kvyat and Magnussen are on the 2nd row, but once again it's a Williams front row lockout for the 4th time this season, with Bottas claiming pole position, putting the pressure on Hülkenberg for the lead of the Drivers' Championship. Gutierrez received a 3-place grid penalty for the race, and obviously Marcus Ericsson fell outside the 107% rule but will start under the steward's discretion. So the 67 lap race around the infamous Nürburgring. Let's get started. Massa again having another first lap incident for the 2nd race in a row. Grosjean and Kvyat also failed to finish the race, with the first home hero of Adrian Sutil also failing to finish, retiring on lap 47. Then come the alternating quartet of Kobayashi and Bianchi, picking up 1 and 2 points respectively. Gutierrez moves forward 2 spaces from where he started to end 8th, behind Verne and Maldonado, who had a good race coming from 13th to 6th. Perez and Magnussen are next, both a lap down and behind their teammates again in the race. Button is the first podium finisher, almost 70 seconds off of race winner Valtteri Bottas, who takes his 3rd win in a row in front of the final home hero Nico Hülkenberg. Magnussen claims the fastest lap of the race, half a second clear from Sergio Perez. So for the 3rd time in a row, Valtteri Bottas secures top prize of 25 points ahead of Nico Hülkenberg, who keeps a 10-race point-scoring streak in 2nd place. There's no real movement in the top half at all after today's race, as Gutierrez goes from 16th to 13th, leaving the 2 Caterhams last and 2nd last. Bianchi also moves up ahead of Sutil to lead the bottom half of the grid. Hülkenberg's lead is now only 3 points as we head towards the summer break, having come down each race since it peaked at 36 points in Canada. Both Bottas and Hülkenberg have pulled away significantly from Button, who's 35 points back in a lonely 3rd, 31 points clear from his teammate. Massa has also slipped further from Perez now by 23 points, and he's a comfortable 25 points away from Kvyat. Force India grabbed the biggest haul of points of the field with 28, with McLaren bagging 27. Williams again with only 1 driver finishing bag 25, with every other team scoring points too, which is the first time that's happened this season. But there was again no movement in the Constructors' Championship, as Force India gained 3 points on Williams, extending their lead now to 26 points. McLaren also moved to within 3 of second place, and Toro Rosso fall even further behind now, 150 points. With Lotus now 21 points back, but 50 points clear from Marussia. There's sort of three groups forming here. And then Marussia, Sauber share 25, and they are 6 points clear from Caterham at the back of the pack. As we leave the Nürburgring and head to the final race before the summer break, we head to Hungary. As always, qualifying starts us off and we will jump straight into Q1. It's another knockout for Maldonado. That's the 8th time this season and the 4th time he's failed to even set a time. Ahead of him is Chilton, sandwiched between the two Caterhams, with Ericsson behind and Kobayashi in front. Q2 opens with Bianchi in the second Marussia car, 2 seconds off the pace of Grosjean in front. Just over a tenth of a second covered Sutil, Perez and Gutierrez for 8th, 9th and 10th on the grid, with Danny Kvyat 4 tenths clear in P7 but out in Q2. The final Q3 session of the first half of the season sees Magnussen fail to finish in P6. Hulkenberg joins him on the third row of the grid, a half a tenth down on the Toro Rosso of Jean-Eric Vergne. Button and Massa were close, 0.071 separated the two drivers for P2, with the Brazilian getting the front row start. But Valtteri Bottas, winner of the last 3 Grand Prix, storms the most dominant pole of the season so far by over 8 tenths of a second from his teammate, securing Williams' 5th front row lockout. No grid drops for any drivers apart from Magnussen, who after qualifying has to start from the pit lane to repair his car. As we move to the final race of the first half of the season around the 70-lap Hungaroring. The race opens with a DNF for Ericsson on lap 7 and a DNF for Grosjean 3 laps later. The most shocking turn though came a few laps later when both Force Indias retired, lap 14 for Hulkenberg and 22 for Perez, meaning that every driver has now retired at least once this season. Kobayashi and Gutierrez are the last of the non-finishers for this weekend's race. Both Marussias make it into the points, with Bianchi outracing his teammate to P9. Kvyat went backwards in his race from P6 to finish 8th. At the flag, Maldonado claims P7, his second best finish of the season so far, behind a P6 finish in Germany. Sutil had an amazing race to finish P5 ahead of the McLaren of Magnussen in 6th. Button just misses out on the podium in 4th, 8 seconds back from Jean-Eric Vergne, who gets his first podium of his career. Williams, though, bagged a 1-2 finish in the race, with Massa coming out on top to win his first race of the season too, just before the summer break. It's Williams' second 1-2 finish of the year and 4th race win in a row. Bottas tops the fastest lap sheets, equaling his teammate Massa for the most in the season with 3 apiece. Massa finally makes a big dent in the championship though, scoring 25 points, with Bottas taking 18 and Maldonado getting his second personal best finish of 6 points. For the first time since Malaysia in round 2, there is a shift at the top of the championship. Valtteri Bottas moves past Hulkenberg after his DNF. Massa gets past Perez for 5th, with a lot of movement in the midfield as Vergne moves up above Grosjean and Kvyat to 7th. So going into the summer break, Bottas now leads by 15 points from Hulkenberg. Who'd have thought that a few races back? But with a large 29 point back to Button in 3rd, and then 32 points back to Magnussen in 4th. Massa moves to within 12 points of Magnussen after his win, 2 points ahead of Perez. 41 points is the gap now to the midfield, headed by Vergne this time, 3 points from his teammate. Sutil moves to within 3 points of Maldonado in 10th, with the bottom 5 drivers separated by 9 points. So Williams scored more than double the amount of points than their closest rivals McLaren this race. They took the full 43 points to McLaren's 20. As for the championship, it's the same with the drivers. The first time since Malaysia there is a switch at the top, with Williams moving ahead of Force India, McLaren, Toro Rosso and Lotus all stay put, and Sauber move from 7th to 6th ahead of Marussia now. And the same again going into the summer break. Williams now take a 17-point lead over Force India, who are now only 9 points back from McLaren and in danger of slipping further from the top. 151 points now separates Toro Rosso from the top 3 teams, with 34 points between them and Lotus. Sauber, with their 10-point boost from this race, moves 7 points clear from Marussia, who are still 9 clear from the bottom of the table. And there we have it, the summer break. It has been very long awaited. I hope you have all enjoyed this really cool rundown of my Formula 1.5 season. I've enjoyed recording this a lot. It's taken me 2 days to record this, and once I start editing, it's probably going to take me another 2 days. So expect this to come out, well, why am I saying expect this to come out in a video that hasn't even come out yet? Anyway, it will come out when it does, and I will release the second half probably a week or two after this. I hope you have all enjoyed. This has been a hell of a lot of fun to do. There were a couple tongue twisters and stuff, but I sort of pushed through it. I hope you have all enjoyed, and I will catch you guys in the next video.